talking to you normally right now.
Okay. It's picking you up really good, like my software. So let me see.
Oh, cool.
All right. So, I mean, basically, I just wanted to do like, I don't even, I've never had a discussion. I usually talk about music and art and stuff. So I've never had like a serious sit down discussion on my show. I had a comedian on a week ago. So this would be kind of different. I'm recording the Zoom on my software here, so it'll just kind of it'll show our faces, and then if we have to, look something up, I'll change the view to oh no, not immersive. No, you know Zoom better than me probably. All right, so then I'll change the view here, and then we can look something up on Google. I can share my screen or something because I want to be able to, do that.
All right. Oh, you're gonna fact check me live. Wow. Okay.
Well, that should be. Look, listen. I'm not a fact check. Um, fear. I'm not afraid of fact checking, and that's what I think. There's a disconnect in like some. Come on. Why isn't this giving me a good view? Give me a second. There we go. All right. Cool. All right. So I'll have us full screen unless we have to access Google or something.
Okay.
Um, what's a good website to have up? Like we can have in the background.
Just in the back.
Yeah.
I don't know. You want to put the CDC website up there?
Not really. I almost don't even want to get involved. Like I don't even want to put up a video about it because it's so. Did you happen to check out the whole Joe Rogan's um thing with Sanjay Gupta, right? From CNN.
I did get to see part of that. To be honest, I don't watch too much Joe Rogan, and it's just he talks for a very, very long time, and sometimes it's on point, and sometimes it's kind of rambling.
When you talk for 3 hours, at least
well, yeah, I mean,
half of it's got to be
a lot
some.
of time,
Yeah.
but yeah, I did see some of the part with Sanjay Gupta. My opinion of Sanjay Gupta is that, he does, I think he's a neurologist by training. But, he's not an epidemiologist. He's not a virologist or anything like that. So, I mean, even his information, you got to take kind of, I mean, even mine. I mean, I'm a scientist, yes, I'm an analytical chemist, but that doesn't make me an epidemiologist. And part of my stance on this is that there's too many people out there that really don't have the expertise to have an opinion worth listening to that are really opining a whole lot.
Yeah.
Part of this is it's sort of like going to, if you have a problem with your car, you don't go to a carpenter, you go to an auto mechanic. And not too many people are doing it. Everyone who has, did a science fair project back in middle school suddenly thinks that they're an expert on everything. They found something on Google, so they know it all. My sort of take on it is really it makes sense to listen to the people that really do have expertise in this. The Faucis of the world, which he's been doing this since the Reagan administration. It's kind of worth listening to him.
I I'll give you my perspective on where I'm coming from on like starting from the when we were talking about Sanjay Gupta and CNN and Joe Rogan. I follow Joe Rogan a lot. I found myself not being in agreement with him a lot in when I first listened to him. And I'm still not in agreement with him a lot. I call him Joe, I'm not a conservative Rogan. Because he is conservative if he really like boils it down. He just kind of is liberal for his fame's sake. You know what I'm saying? Like he understands where he stands. I think he understands where he stands in the world. He's kind of in the middle, if you really think about it. He's the most middle that any commentator who would be more. A lot of people are left and right. I think Joe Rogan is actually in the middle, and mostly because of the guests he has. He's not judgmental in his guests. He will invite anybody. He's had Bernie Sanders. He's had Tulsi Gabbard. He's had scientists and archaeologists and people who studied aliens. Like, he's had all sorts of people on. He'll take, what's his name, Alex Jones. You know what I'm saying? Like, not because he believes what he's saying, but because he believes that, like, in letting everyone speak and have their word, and everyone can't be wrong all the time. You know what I mean? You can catch things from anybody. But that's where I stand on, like, Joe Rogan. But, like, Sanjay Gupta, like, I don't think he was saying he knew what he was talking about because he knows where he stands as far as his position and what his profession. But the fact that they were lying and stuff, and he blatantly knew it. And there's a lot of stuff that you know, from the beginning that some people, some skeptics would call blatant lies. And some people would call them, well, we were just learning and we had no idea. And we happen to believe, if I'm going to stand on the other side, we happen to believe that there's a lot of lies that were told from the beginning, so we don't believe a damn thing that anybody's saying. And there's some truth to the shit that we're skeptical about. And that's kind of like where I stand, talking to both sides, like, you know, like our friend, but also talking to you and being in the comments. I don't know if I fall on one side or the other. I just know that I'm kind of like, I can hear where both sides are coming from.
Well, all right. So, I mean, when you say lies in the beginning of this, what kind of thing are you talking about? Like, what's coming to your mind?
Let's say if we could start from the testing. Were they lies, or was it, did they know that, you know, all right, you immediately when you talk about testing and numbers, when people start going out getting tested just because they feel like, oh my God, I gotta go get tested, when there's no reason for it, that from the jump is already gonna up numbers. And instead of reporting it that way, you're not reporting it that way. You're reporting it like the numbers are spiking, and you're fearing people into shit. So from the beginning, we could have had our own decision making. We could have been like, all right, maybe we should mask up when we go into these places, but not here. We didn't need mandates. But the way they framed it was based on that to begin with, because there's 3 different types of testing. And I know because we had to go through it with my son, and he was tested. But we didn't know either. So I'm willing to say, okay, you guys didn't know what was going on, the masks, you weren't sure. So we know more now. But not everyone knew. Like, people had some information for a long time that people just now getting hip to. So testing ups numbers, and the media upped the fear, where it didn't need to be like that. And the people that are refusing to do stuff were also part of that. I didn't think that they needed to refuse to do things to help as well. You know what I mean? That's where I'm standing as well.
Well, all right. So there are a couple of things here. And when you say testing, are you talking about the testing numbers being off, or is that what you're talking about?
Just being up and calling them cases. When you're just, if someone's getting tested, sure, it's a case, but it's not a positive case.
So there are a number of things that are going on here. Let's just take that for starters. So when they're collecting these numbers, I mean, you have sort of this chain of communication. If you've ever played telephone or something like that, you know, the message will get garbled if the chain is long enough.
Right.
But on the one hand, I mean, at the very beginning, you have the hospitals. So the hospitals, you know, and the CDC puts out guidance to the hospitals and saying, all right, this is what you call a case, and this is what you don't call a case.
And they were not doing that.
Well, and in the very beginning, we didn't actually have testing. We were going off of symptoms. And the CDC,
Yep.
and the CDC did put out guidance of, you know, what's the difference between COVID and what's the difference between the flu. Of course, then you leave it up to the hospitals to try to interpret that.
Or any COVID, or any coronavirus for that matter. So they could have been testing for coronavirus, and we still don't know. Just like we don't know what the Delta variant is. I was surprised when I went to physical therapy the other day. Somebody said that they tested positive for not tested positive, but they were diagnosed with the flu. I was like, they're diagnosing with the flu again? It's a skeptical thing.
So I wouldn't be surprised at the very beginning of this if some of the numbers were off. Now, to what extent? I mean, is anyone's guess. I mean, I actually read the CDC guidance on it, and they were pretty specific that certain things were COVID and certain things were not COVID.
Right, right.
But I still go back to, you have someone at a hospital that's going to try to interpret that.
Wait. I'm sorry to cut you off. Give me 2 seconds. The number one lie is where it came from.
I'm not. You know what? We can get into that later because that's really up in the air.
No, it's not. No, it's not. The first cases were nowhere near the market, and a lot of information disappeared when all this started happening. And people were, I can recall people having symptoms or things happening in like October, November.
Look, I would not be surprised if this was a lab leak from Wuhan.
I'm done saying that. I'm totally saying it's definitely.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not 100% on that. At the end of the day, it's kind of, unless you're looking to point the finger at China and saying they are, if you're saying they're doing it intentionally, that's one thing. That'd be an act of war against the world.
But then when you have this guy saying that he wasn't even, the funding was for this, they knew what was happening is what I'm contesting. Whether or not it leaked or was put out purposefully, that's such a I don't want to go there. I'm just saying, like, they knew what was going on before it came here.
Well, all right. So I wouldn't actually be surprised if they did know, but I can see where they might as well. Look, the CDC gets a certain amount of money, or the NIH gets a certain amount of money to give to these labs, and there's only a few of them in the world. The Class 4 labs.
All right.
Most of them are in the United.
What is a Class 4 lab?
So a Class 4 biological lab is where they're really doing the scary stuff, per se. This is where they're doing, and when I say gain-of-function research, people tend to think of that as weaponization. That's not what I'm talking about.
Gain of function. Well, function to gain usage.
Yes. So the idea of it is seeing where a virus might mutate to. Now, one might say, hey, that's a great way to come up with a biological weapon. And you're right. You could come up with a biological weapon that way.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, there is sort of a research at looking at how these viruses mutate, where they might go. Something that is pretty innocuous now can become dangerous down the road. And you want to be able to, in some way, predict that.
Right.
So is that kind of research, and it is a legitimate branch of virology or epidemiology. I would not be surprised if, the NIH or the CDC was giving money to this lab in Wuhan to do that kind of research, because that's the kind of research, that's the kind of lab you would do it in. But how much oversight there was, I don't know. I didn't know if, did they just give a barrel of money and say, have a day? Or was there some sort of oversight? My guess is there wasn't enough oversight, if any. But I will point out that even in these labs in the United States, and this is kind of the scary thing, mistakes do happen. There are examples of smallpox being shipped by UPS, and you're not supposed to do that.
These labs, from a lab?
Yeah. From one lab to another.
Oh, yeah.
I mean people do screw up. Now, has it turned into a smallpox epidemic? Thank goodness no, but mistakes do happen. At the end of the day, unless you're going to say that China was legitimately trying to create a weapon and infect the rest of the world, it's really kind of who cares? At the end, we got a virus and we got to deal with it.
Right. You wouldn't know that until it actually, So, yeah.
Well, unless you find a memo from Xi Jinping saying, let's infect the world.
But if you're just doing research,
you're never going to have that.
Unless anybody actually said it out loud, like whether it was going to be used or not. But then there's the idea that they hesitated in telling us the truth about it in order to possibly gain some kind of upper hand. An economic upper hand. And these are all the theories, right? And I understand from one particular side or group of people, but these theories are relevant because it's kind of true. Like things like that, it's possible really quickly they could have made that decision. Like, let's hesitate on telling them, or we don't want to tell the world and scare them. Like, because that's what Trump's thing was. oh, you know, we didn't want to like tell everybody at once, and we thought we'd scare them, right? So here we go from, you know, he made a mistake too. He was unaware of it.
Well, I mean, Trump made a number of mistakes in this, but that's also kind of irrelevant at this point as well. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump, but and there's some places where he really did screw up. But I don't think that's really pertinent right now. I mean, when I look at this, it's a matter of what's going to save lives, what's going to bring us back to, you know, what was before, or as close to as we can to that.
Well, we should have done what was recommended.
I will say this, you know, when you have someone like Fauci or anyone in the CDC or NIH that has to deal with this kind of things, people that are in public health, there's two elements that they have to deal with. One is the science, but part of it is also dealing with the people and the population. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that people are responding to in kind of a negative light is they feel like they're being handled.
Oh, they didn't feel like they got the information. It was funneled to them versus like, and that's why you had people like DeSantis in Florida rebelling, just for the sake of we got to do the opposite of what's being told. Where I'm saying that none of this stuff should have been mandated. It should have been able to be like, okay, cool. Like, how you guys doing? You're a smaller population. All right, well, check this out. Just do some little recommendations. Americans don't want to be told what to do.
Well, that's it. And people felt like they were being, and in fact, they were. That would be my opinion.
I saw lines at Target in April. Like, people were lining up 6 feet away. I was like, this is so weird. And I was coming out of the hospital. I was being safe. We were being so safe, right? But just to come out of the hospital, and then I'm hearing these conspiracy theories that, like, people are standing in line to get groceries, you know? I was like, wow.
Well, I mean, people also, I mean, and, you know, one of the things I do in my line of work, which is, you know, more chemistry type thing, is I'm on a hazardous material response team.
All right.
An emergency response team for chemical spills, that kind of thing. And if you look at the training in that, if you had like some unknown material that spilled out all over the middle of the road or something like that, you know, the response is first to be very conservative. You're going to keep people very far away.
But you tell people how dangerous it is from the beginning. You don't just be like, well, I don't know, guys. You can wear some boots if you want to. No, you come up front. Listen, this is really bad. People are. Was it true that the people were falling out in the middle of the streets in China? Because from what I heard, my friend told me don't share elevators with people, take the stairs, do this. And he probably gave us really good advice because we were in and out of the hospital. We didn't know what was going on. Right. So if we, again, recommendations would have been great based on truth, not, well, I don't know. No, it's not necessary to wear masks. We were trying to save the mask for the staff. Like, don't lie to us. Tell us to jump. How dangerous is that spill?
But here's the problem on the larger scale. I agree with you. First of all, you need to know how dangerous the spill is. If you don't know what the material is, you can't really say that. So you start out with everyone just being conservative. You're going to stay.
Did the people that made the spill know how dangerous it was?
Let's assuming they don't even know. Like, no one knows what it is.
That's China.
It does happen.
We'll put China in the truck that spilled the chemicals. China spilled the chemicals. Did they know?
They're forthcoming.
Did anybody here know that there was dangerous chemicals being spilled?
Well, this is assuming everyone's forthcoming. I mean,
Trump knew in February, and I'm gonna be a Trump against Trump on that. You knew, bro. You knew.
So there's another side to this. There's the politics, and if you remember at the very beginning of this, on the one hand, you had sort of the Fauci camp, which was kind of taking a more conservative approach. Then you had people like Peter Navarro, who was an economic advisor to Donald Trump, saying that we don't need to do downs, you don't need to do anything.
Right.
With my MBA, have determined that this is not a problem.
Right.
You had Jared Kushner and all his wondrous medical knowledge opining on what the right thing to do is. And the problem with it is it did become politicized.
Well, they were looking at it from an economic standpoint too. What countries didn't shut down?
Well, I know Sweden didn't.
And did they mask up?
No, they were very much, let's just let it go.
They're a small population.
but yeah, they are a small and not particularly densely populated area. And you could make the argument that they did the right thing by their country. Though if you look at their numbers compared to other countries like them that did have lockdowns, that did have masks, and the mandates in there, their numbers were much higher. So if you were to compare, let's say, Sweden to Norway,
similar country population,
similar countries, Norway did better.
What's the country that's right outside of China that still rolled through business and everything?
Well, you have Taiwan.
Was it Taiwan?
Well, Taiwan. No, Taiwan. See, the thing with Taiwan is they can't be recognized as a separate country because otherwise China gets really upset.
I heard that controversy going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So Taiwan kind of did their own thing. They're not part of the WHO.
But they still took recommendations. Like, I believe they went all through business. They had masks. They took nothing had to be mandated. Where like it felt very coming down on the population, like over something that some people didn't see as dangerous. It's dangerous, but there's a small percentage of that danger. So when they're looking at it from that perspective, they're like, okay, so we just need to be safe. You guys don't got to come in here and tell us what to do. Like,
well, it is also very typical, and this is more of a cultural thing than anything else, where in Taiwan, at least, they don't tend to be quite as, shall I say, belligerent as Americans can be.
Oh, yeah.
When the government says, hey, you all should wear a mask,
they're like, all right.
The government told me to wear a mask, so I will.
Exactly.
In the U.S., you'll have me who will wear a mask, you who might wear a mask, and there's someone else out there who's going to say, masks are going to suffocate all of us.
I love that you recognize that I'm kind of like in the middle. Like, I'm not really like,
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no place in here where I didn't look at this myself and say, is the government overreacting to this? Is this, what's silly here, what's not? Right. But I will point out that from a public health issue, especially if you are, having to come out with recommendations, you got to realize that Americans are going to act a certain way. I mean, you think some of the silly things we did. I mean, everyone bought the toilet paper off the shelf.
But if they knew that, I don't know. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, but it's like that.
Well, but here's the funny thing about that. And this is my example of the American mentality. So all the toilet paper is being pulled off the shelves.
Can we start a fire?
Yeah. You got an audience?
Yeah, he wants to start a fire. We didn't start the fire. It was always fire. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is you don't want to drop that knowledge on the population. However, I think it needs to be dropped on the population and let the leaders in different places decide what's best for their tribe.
Well, the problem is this, and I'm going to finish what I was saying, where all the Charmin's gone, all the typical toilet paper is gone, but there was one brand that had unbleached toilet paper, so it was kind of a brownish toilet paper.
What?
That was bull. No one touched the brown toilet paper.
Oh my gosh!
Even though you couldn't buy any other toilet paper, there was nothing left. No one would touch that.
What did they think? It was like pre-browned?
They toilet paper is supposed to be white.
Oh. No, we have unbleached flour and stuff. Oh, you're off camera. There you go.
Yeah, someone tried to call me, so I.
Oh, got it. Later, you got your own like little save screen. It said your name and everything. It was pretty cool.
But in any event, I see what you're saying, where everyone should have the information. Unfortunately, and my opinion of this is that there are enough, shall I say, overly reactive people out there that would use that information poorly. The other problem you have is if you have Florida doing one thing, New Jersey doing another thing, and North Carolina doing something in the middle.
But then it's the talk of boundaries.
Well, it's not like we have force fields between our states.
Oh, right. But it's also not like we have to.
Sorry, I got to see this for a moment.
All right.
Give me a moment. Okay. Let me just answer this. Sorry, my son is texting me.
Gives me a chance to fix my beard. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We're going to check out this little sponsorship thing right here real quick. Check this out. Oh, no, I had No, thanks for watching. I got some little promo stuff over here. Oh no, we're good. There we go.
All right.
I was gonna bring an ad. Shout out to Bumblebee Productions, Good Karma, Delta 8 Products, Good Karma Tattoo. You can go get them. Check it out. It's good stuff. All right. Where'd we leave off?
So we're talking about states doing things differently.
All right. Let's say we live in a world that has no that has no federal oversight other than. Would you consider the health the health? No. I think the health I think should be oversight federally, right? Where Americans messed up, and I'm going to take on that is there where they always mess up. You can't tell me what to do. Like, God damn, man, if you only would have listened when the recommendations were made, there would be no need for mandates, because then you got like the reverse effect. You're getting a reverse effect of mandates, and you're getting resistance. Well, you're not going to mandate us in a free country. Let us decide what we think is going to be best for our surroundings. You don't think a community of 60 people can handle each other?
It's not a matter of a community of 60 people. It's when those 60 people go into, let's say, a city of 6 million. The problem is this: if you have a place like, let's take Taiwan. I think I said Singapore earlier. I meant Taiwan. If you have Taiwan, it's an island.
Right.
If people don't always, follow, and sort of stay in lockstep, everything goes wrong. The whole island goes to hell in a handbasket because everyone's trapped in one little area. In the United States, we kind of have a very diverse set of populations. On the one hand, you have, let's say, the very rural areas.
Right.
You have like the Dakotas or something like that. On the other extreme, you have New York City, which is the most densely populated city in the world. You can't run North Dakota like New York City, and it's difficult. You can't run New York City like North Dakota.
Right.
And that's the problem, because when you do something at the federal level, you got to deal with both of them. And in a case like a pandemic, you kind of have to err on the side of what's the best thing for New York City versus what's the best thing for North Dakota.
But we don't run everything like New York City.
We don't. But the virus doesn't care whether you're in New York City and North Dakota.
But what's with the travel restrictions and this and that? We can do our best. Like, did Taiwan limit their travel?
I can't recall everything that Taiwan did.
I just know that I only reference them because they were able to roll through and keep business going and wear masks, and they followed all the recommendations, and where they didn't have to come down on the population as a mandate. And in certain states, it went better than other states because their population wasn't as dense, and you let them make decisions on whether or not I should wear a mask outside. Like, when we started getting all that information should have been shared. It wasn't, like vitamin D and all the preventative things that came with it,
Yeah, when talking about Taiwan, when you say travel, I don't think anyone was traveling out or into Taiwan. That part, like the international travel,
maybe that would have been all right, yeah.
But traveling within Taiwan, I don't know. But here's the difference: Taiwan's a little tiny place.
Yeah.
It's kind of a homogeneous population. On the other hand, in the United States, again, you have this vast area, and you can get different pockets. That's why you've seen with the virus, it's not like what was happening in New York was happening in North Dakota, at the same time.
Right.
It was very big in New York City, and then you could see slowly. It was big in New York City. It was big in California, where you had a lot of travel coming in, especially from other parts of the world, and then it kind of spread more inland. There was a point in here where I think it was West Virginia didn't have a single solitary case.
I think I remember at one point I was like, what state doesn't have a case yet?
Yeah,
and then there's only so long they could be like, oh shit, that eventually something was gonna happen.
Well, and in my opinion, that's because the West Virginia Tourist Board wasn't doing its job and having a whole lot of people come to West Virginia. But ultimately, they did, and it's just you had this kind of rolling thing.
But do you don't think when
Um,
people started getting scared, they started going out testing and upping some numbers where we weren't, because all people were saying was it's this less than 1%, if you were to get it, da 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 da. Da. Okay, but everybody's so scared that they went out and got tested, and then we think that there's all these cases, but they're not saying whether they're positive or negative. Remember what I talked about my son when he was taking a test? He was a patient under investigation. He's
Right.
right. He wasn't even considered. They didn't even. So if let's say, how does the news get their information from the hospitals?
So what's supposed to happen here, and this did happen, but I don't think the news really picked up on it. And of course, with the news, you have the CNN, the Foxes of the world, but then you also have the local stations, and you get very different things because they're getting their information from different places.
Right.
CNN or Fox may go to the CDC, but if you're the Fox affiliate in the middle of nowhere, Florida, or something like that, you may get your information from the local hospital. The problem
from
here
the
is
hospital versus down the line
versus the CDC.
Okay.
So what's happening here is people are getting these cases. And remember, at first we didn't have tests. We were just going on what the CDC recommendations were, the CDC guidance for calling it COVID or not.
Right.
The hospital would report it. There was a computer system set up where they could report it, and that would go to the CDC, and then the CDC would review it. Of course, it takes a while for the CDC to review each case. I mean, if you have tens of thousands of cases,
Right.
you have so many data analysts there going through each one. And some of them, they would say, all right, that's not really a case. And some of them, they would confirm.
Was it re-reported then? You know what I'm saying? Like once the hospital's like, yeah, we got a case. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, it wasn't a case. And then they go, hey, guys, guess what? No, there's none of that going on. So if you're multiplying that by thousands.
Well, no, actually, the CDC, what they would put out is a preliminary report.
Okay.
So we got X number of cases. The hospitals reported 10,000 cases.
All right.
But if you looked a week or two later, they might put out their official report, which that 10,000 now went down to 8,000.
Right.
And people who didn't understand that started looking at that information, being, look, people
like
are
it was
lying.
Changing. Oh yeah. Well, at the hospital level, some people just may have been like real confused and reported whatever they could, or I don't know. Was there money involved in reporting it in such a way?
Well, I mean, so there was that theory as well, and to be really straight about it, yes, because there was a reimbursement aspect for hospitals regarding whether it was COVID or not COVID.
Right.
So you can raise the question legitimately: did that bias their reporting? Did they add another 2,000 to their just because? Hey, look, more money, more money, more money.
Right.
Now, did they do that maliciously? I don't know.
Yeah, you'd have to get in the head of like one of the people.
I can't get into I can't read everyone's mind and why they do what they do.
Or they were just confused and they really were reporting things that weren't that.
That could be the other thing. I mean, they were legitimately
there's a lot of that too. Right.
They legitimately were trying to do the best they could.
Right.
But I mean, and then when the test came about, I mean, still, you'd have the CDC that would have to review the case, or actually the best one would be deaths. So the hospital would report a death. Now, actually, I went through this on Facebook with somebody. It may have been Danny or someone else, where COVID was getting reported on all these death certificates.
Yeah.
But you look at how death
COVID or of COVID, right?
Well, no one ever dies of COVID. COVID may have been a mitigating factor, but if I, and I had COVID, if I had passed from that, it would be because of cardiac arrest or pulmonary edema.
Right.
Like that's what did me in. But somewhere on that list, COVID would have popped up.
Right, but if there was incentive for it to be reported, they'll, who's going to check and see if he died with COVID?
Well, the CDC went through all those death certificates.
Okay.
And I don't know everything they did did they investigate each one like thoroughly? I doubt it. Sometimes it was probably pretty obvious. But there were a few sketchy ones. And again, the deaths would be, if you had 10,000 deaths, maybe you had 8,000 when the official report came out.
Yeah.
But people got all caught up on, the numbers are changing. One week the CDC is saying this, next week they are saying
I remember that.
different.
Yeah.
And
I looked at it like I did a deep dive, to check and see what was going on. So I understand some of this stuff, but
yeah, and a lot of this stuff, I mean, and this is just how science goes. This is an evolving situation. Both the CDC, the government, everyone is trying to make the best policies over the information they have. And the information is in a lot of ways incomplete. I mean, it's still incomplete. We have different variants. Well, how are the different variants going to interact? You got the Delta, now there's Lambda.
How do you know? How do you know?
I mean, years and years and years from now, maybe we'll have this handled, but by that time, probably the pandemic will be all over. So you got to make decisions on the best information that you have. Are they 100% correct? No. One of the examples of this very early on was Fauci made a comment about not needing to wear masks.
But I understand that too. It's so much misunderstanding and misinformation the other direction. I don't know.
Yeah. And Fauci's been very clear about, look, this is what I think is now, but I'm humble enough to say, I mean, he'll use a phrase like that. I am humble enough to say I don't know everything, and I may have to do something different down the road. I think part of the issue in the very beginning is, Trump in the way that Trump is, it's kind of bombastic about things. It's kind of, I know everything.
Right.
And he would be wrong about something. There's the whole thing about huffing or inhaling disinfectants.
But there was also, I mean, people were calling him xenophobic or whatever because he was trying to do some travel bans. There was that not even confusion. There was purposeful, like they wanted to I do recognize the type of attacks that he was getting all the time. Like it wasn't necessary because they were just trying to look better. Like, oh, now he's xenophobic. Look at him. He's going to put a travel ban. Nobody knew what was going on, but he was like, okay, that's probably the best thing to do. People will say, we should have done that, and he would have been praised for doing it.
Well, I mean, that was the thing about Trump. I mean, he was very much, I'm right. I know what I'm talking about. I can't be wrong. And he would make a statement about the disinfectants, which I heard that statement. I mean, the media very much took that out of context. Everyone should just,
he just should shut up and read the script. I'm sorry, not the script, but.
Well, that was one of his problems. He just should have shut up and let the scientists talk and say thank you very much.
He was putting his 2 cents in. That's not what a representative is. I think people confuse what representatives are supposed to do, and then they think that every representative is supposed to speak their mind. No, you're representing other people's voices, and I guess that's the voices he was representing. The off the cuff, let me just randomly.
That's where I go back to. I mean, who are we really listening to here? And really, we should be listening to the epidemiologist, the virologist, someone like Fauci. And I use him as an example.
How come there's no more? Why is there only one guy?
Well, there isn't one guy. I mean, Fauci is the.
There should have always been a panel. There should have been 4 or 5 people.
No, sometimes you need one guy who's going to be the mouthpiece for the panel.
Well, Trump became the mouthpiece for his panel.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, and that's kind of his personality.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, that was his personality. Fauci, spoke. He has a bunch of other scientists supporting him. He's not going to have everyone come out there, and that way you at least get as consistent a message as you're going to get. But people we shouldn't be listening to, in my opinion, are, I mean, whether it's Anderson Cooper or Tucker Carlson, who I can't stand him one bit, but
he's so funny.
I mean, these are journalists, and they're getting information, but they don't really understand it. These are a bunch of guys that have liberal arts, degrees, and in journalism or English or something like that. They're not scientists, and it's not that they're stupid. It's just not their. It's not their area of study. It's not their area of expertise.
But he's the mouthpiece, so they're just getting the news. I don't think media should have an opinion unless you present yourself as an opinion. Media should be categorized by And it kind of is, but not clearly. It's not clear enough for people to be like, oh, he's giving us his opinion piece. When you watch Fox or you watch CNN, like even, bigger companies, the information is just given to you and you're just reading it.
Well, that's a product of the 24-hour news cycle. And you are, the same for age group I am. I mean, you remember a time when you had just the nightly news. You did not have
Yeah,
CNN.
you had like 6, 7 o'clock, 5, 6 o'clock.
Exactly. And you had, Tom
Maybe you
Brokaw.
caught it at 10.
Right. And you had maybe an hour to have that news program.
Right.
Well, when you only have an hour, you don't really have a whole lot of time to opine. You sit there and this happened, this happened, this happened, and that's the news.
Right.
With 24-hour news cycles, sometimes you just got to fill 24 hours. So now you're getting, whether it's Sean Hannity or Don Lemon, and I'm using both CNN and Fox because I'm not trying to make it one's worse than the other. In a lot of ways, they are subject to the same problem.
Of course.
Which is you just need people talking. And they just talk and talk.
They never
and talk.
have the opposite on their channel. Like they never have, like you'll see like 6, 7 panelists or whatever, right? And they're all arguing the same point from the same point of view and perspective. And I'm like, can there be one guy just saying something different? Like at least make it look like you're trying here.
Well, sometimes it's hard for them to get a guest that will do that. Actually, when the CNN during the election, I know this is a completely different topic, but they had Rick Santorum on their panel, talking about the election while the ballot was being counted. And, Santorum being a Republican, he's there with Anderson Cooper and the whole liberal group sitting there. He looked like if someone was, setting his ass on fire, I don't think he could have looked more uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, you're going to be uncomfortable, man. Like, yeah.
And he was just getting beat up left and right.
Yeah.
I give credit for just being out there and doing it. I don't think he'll ever do it again. But it would be the same thing if you did the same thing on Fox, where if you had, someone very liberal, I mean, it'd be like Hillary Clinton sitting there with Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity.
That should be able to be. That's why I love Joe Rogan. He will invite anybody that even disagrees with him. And he makes it look so easy. That's the thing. Like he can be a complete opposite opinion of you and still be like, oh, I can see where you're coming from on that. Yeah. Well, what about this? He's just found a niche, man.
Well, I mean, and Joe Rogan, I mean, again, I don't watch his show all that often. I've watched some of it. I mean, to me, he comes off as more of an entertainer. He's really not so much an expert on
the guests are the show, bro.
Well, and depending on who he has as guests, I mean, I thought Sanjay Gupta going on there was pretty cool. I know very often he has like Ben Shapiro or one of them there in there.
I listen to him all the time on purpose.
I'm sorry. Is there a lot of background noise? I'm sorry. It's the restaurant next door.
No, you're good. No, you're good. No, look, I listen to a lot of I listen to Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, that bearded guy on purpose to get what they're saying. I'll sit there with them in my ear and I'll walk around doing my building or whatever I'm doing for the day and I'll argue with them while they're in my ear. I'll be like, no, you shouldn't. Da, da, da. You got to get the other perspective and see where they're coming from so you can, some of the stuff I'm like, oh, no, I can see where you're coming from. And other stuff I'm like, no way. And I'm the same way with the other side people. I'm like, look, you guys are ridiculous right now. We got to be able to like call each other out.
Well, the other way, and what I typically do is I don't listen to any of them, and I'll actually go to the various journal articles. I'm not a doctor or a medical doctor, but I am familiar enough with statistics because I do plenty of that I can look at, let's say, a clinical study and see if it was good or bad. I got a good gist of that.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll actually go to that. And I find what I have found throughout all this is, especially on social media like Facebook, is that I get into these conversations where someone said, well, there's this study that shows, ivermectin is the best thing for you or something like that.
Right.
And, there are different types of studies, of clinical studies. Some of them, they're just looking at a population of, the doctors did this, they reported it, and it's sort of a survey of a bunch of different things.
Right.
Those aren't necessarily the best studies. You really need sort of the double-blind clinical studies where you have a placebo group and
that's what I heard. Yeah, because there are studies that I was looking at studies for my son, and I was really like, viewed a couple of them, you know. So okay.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when you have an open label where someone knows what they're taking, I mean, there is a placebo effect in there, but there's also, doctor's bias as well. If doctors are trying to treat a bunch of patients, let's say for COVID, they kind of make judgment calls on which patient is going to benefit from this medication and which patient needs something else.
Right.
It's not like you just give them, let's say, ivermectin one way or the other. You need to do that, and you're going to lose patients that way. I mean, that's the other thing. Doctors are sort of in the business of saving patients, not seeing what a medication does.
Right.
And so there's an inherent bias there where they will try to do what they think is best. They're not going to give ivermectin to the worst patient. They'll give it to a mild patient. The worst patient they're putting on oxygen or something like that, or putting them on a ventilator.
But what if that's the who needs it? Like, I don't even I don't even think Joe Rogan needed it. I think my argument on him is that, like, he bragged about being so healthy and then got it, and then he's like, "Oh, I fucking eat the kitchen sink." I was like, "I thought you said you were good, bro. Like what are you talking about?" But maybe that's what people need that are going through it. Versus,
look, when I had it, I took absolutely nothing. I drank orange juice. I had my fluids and stuff like that. Like, I was drinking a lot of water and stuff like that just to keep myself hydrated.
Yeah.
I slept a whole lot, and I did take some ibuprofen or Aleve for some of the pain symptoms that I had. I had a lot of weird symptoms in there. But aside from that, I really just monitored myself. I just used a pulse oximeter on my finger and saw how my oxygen saturation was.
Okay.
And did otherwise nothing.
So that's what people are saying. That's what people are saying. They're like, dude, they're blowing this out of proportion. Like, a lot of us are fine. Like, why do I need to wear a mask inside a business if there's not a lot of people in there, and people are like, it's gonna be all right.
Well, I will say this. I mean, I know other people. I do know people that have died from it. No one close to me, but I do know acquaintances that have passed from it. So I just consider myself lucky.
Right.
And I got it back in February, so it was right before the vaccine became widely available for people in my age group. So I just consider myself lucky. I'm also lucky that the way my house is designed, I could keep my kids from getting it. I kind of quarantined myself.
Nice. Yeah.
So they didn't get it. But I will tell you, it knocked me out. I was out of commission for a month. The month of February is kind of.
Why didn't you want them to get it?
Why didn't I want them to get the virus?
Yeah. Well, okay. There's They changed the wording of herd immunity, right? And then they changed the wording of immunity, right? Vaccine induced and then infection.
Right.
So how old are your kids?
So one is 13, one is 16.
And they can get the vaccine.
They've gotten the vaccine.
Okay. And did you got it before the vaccine was available?
I got the vaccine. So after I was sort of done with COVID, at that time, what they were saying is natural immunity lasts about 90 days. That's what they knew. It was at least 90 days, but they weren't sure about beyond that.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah. Okay. All right. Which would be better?
So
at the time, was that February 21 or February 20?
I got it like February 4th.
21?
Oh, 21. Yeah, this year.
Okay, all right.
So
there was a lot of information out by the time you got it. So you knew that if they got it, they'd probably be okay.
Well, I mean, my take on it is this. That's kind of rolling the dice.
Was it? No, I think it was more. Natural immunity was definitely up there back in just this year. That was February.
Yeah, well, February of this year. It's not whether. I mean, what they were saying at the time is that natural immunity is good, but they saw it waning after 90 days. Now, since then, they've said, all right, now we can see it goes out to like 8 months. So I waited the 90 days and then I got the vaccine.
Yeah. Even after your because you wanted to just you waited the 90 days. I had no way. I think I knew. All right. There's a lot of stuff I think I knew prior to 2021 even. Like I don't know how I had more access to more information. I didn't really share it. I kind of was just like, all right, I'm going to do my thing. I was not vocal. You know, like a lot of people are very vocal during this whole thing. They're like, oh, I don't like it. Or, oh, you should do this. You should do that. I think I went off on the mask thing a couple times because I did see people purposely not doing shit when they should have been. But I also saw that a lot of shit was like very hyped up, very drawn out, dramatic, politicized. So, you know, that we knew about natural immunity way before.
Well, I mean, we knew natural immunity. I mean, natural immunity happens whenever you get sick. I mean, your body does develop antibodies against it.
But we knew which groups were affected and we knew which weren't. Way sooner than...
We did know that children or younger adults tend to have a higher survival rate than older adults.
Not tend to. That's like you say words like tend to and things like that. That's like 35.
Well, but
statistically, it was over 90%. It was way close. It's not a roll of the dice. I'm gonna get 100 tickets on this one roll. Like it's not a roll of the dice.
Well, yes, there is an element of it. And look, from my perspective, having had it at that time, and look, yes, I survived it. I got pretty much the month of February was a wasted month. But it wasn't until probably April that I would say, close to 100%.
Right.
I did have some long hauler symptoms. And that's the part that people forget is that there are these long hauler symptoms that would really take you out of commission in some shape, way, or form. For me, it was the lack of taste and smell.
How long did that last?
That was till April.
Okay.
So
that's what you mean. What about that?
So that was also around April. And actually, I will say even today, and I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old. There are times where I don't feel like I was as sharp as I used to be. And what it looks like is this. If I was driving home from somewhere, and I know I have to take a left-hand turn, somewhere along that way.
Yeah.
I would sort of say, I need to take a left-hand turn up here, and then realize, no, I already made that left-hand turn.
Oh, I've done that, though. I don't know. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I was doing that regularly. Like, there are things where, like, I would think I would need to do something that I already did.
Wow.
It's... And look, I mean, doing what I do, I work with hazardous materials and all that. I mean, that's kind of a dangerous thing. Like when you can't smell and you can't taste, I mean, smell is one of those things that I use to tell whether something's about to go horribly wrong.
Right. And I remember you saying that. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was kind of a disconcerting and a little bit scary for me during that time. I didn't want my kids to have to go through that. I mean, even if they had a really mild symptoms, I didn't want them to have to go through that.
Okay.
And one of the things they don't really talk about that, they talk about survival rates. You get people like, oh yeah, you're going to survive. We have a 99% survival rate or a 90% survival rate. It's also, but what happened? What else has happened? How long are you going to be out of commission? What are the long hauler symptoms that you have to deal with? And I just didn't want. I didn't want to take that chance. Yeah. And I happen to be a firm believer in the vaccine and its safety. Because again, part of in that 90 days where before I got the vaccine, I was doing a lot of reading up on it. At that point, the vaccine had come out. A lot of people had it. We were beyond the emergency authorization. Now we were, fully.
We're still not there.
For adults, yes.
Completely.
Yes, the adults.
What was it? What date was it? What is it supposed to be? Because I'm to the understanding still. It's not fully.
So what you? Sorry. So let's talk about that for a moment. The emergency authorization, the emergency use authorization, the EUA.
Yeah.
Is for a drug to actually have that, you need to have a reason for one, but it has to have gone through phase 1 and phase 2 and most of phase 3 clinical trials before the FDA will consider it. The difference between that and a drug that normally gets approved is that the drug that normally gets approved has gotten all the way through phase 3 clinical trials.
Oh, got it.
Regardless of whether a drug gets through phase 3 clinical trials or just before, there's phase 4, which is sort of the post-market surveillance, that's where the FDA requires a company to pay attention to what happens to patients afterwards. So this is where, now that they're putting all these vaccines out there all around the world, the companies do pay attention to what's happening.
Right.
That part hasn't been completed, but post-market surveillance can go on for years.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, my guess is the pandemic will be more or less done with before they're off post-market surveillance.
I compared it to a lot of the stuff my son was going through, because there's studies, there were trials, they still need to study him for the next 10 years. I understood all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, certain cancer medications would be an example where they often use emergency use authorization or compassionate use.
Oh, okay.
Which is, compassionate use is a little bit different in the sense that if you are in a bad enough shape, it's kind of, well, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. They will at least try the drug. It's sort of the Hail Mary pass.
Right.
But again, those are specific cases.
Does that not feel like it? Does that not make like this vaccine feel like a Hail Mary? I mean, no, I think in people's minds, like, so quickly being able to come up with something that, like, obviously, as they said, they've been working on it for a long time, 30 years, even, like, if you really want to base it on that much research, but they had an idea that something like this could be possible, and then skeptics will say that no, they planned it,
well, yeah. I mean, so one of the misconceptions here. And part of this is just how pharmaceutical companies work. Vaccines have been around for a very long time. And I'm not talking the mRNA vaccines. I'm just talking the regular vaccines like the live virus vaccines or the deactivated virus vaccines, the ones that we grew up with,
right.
The measles, mumps, rubella, and tetanus and all that fun stuff. Those things have been along for, I think it's actually toward the end of the 1700s. People were looking at that kind of stuff. But
it's just amazing. It's just amazing that we even thought that these things will prevent things from transmitting. Like, the science of it is just amazing, right?
Well, keep in mind, a lot of it was also trial and error. It's not like you had the FDA back then,
right?
And sometimes the patients lived, and sometimes the patients died, and you say, "Well, I tried."
Right.
But people did pay attention, and eventually, the science did take off.
Data.
But mRNA has been studied since the 1950s. It's not a new thing. Now, it was more towards the 80s where you started getting, some interest in sort of using it as a vaccine, or you could demonstrate that you could cause cells to express certain antigens that the body would pick up, or have a cell do something a little bit different. Some people looked at it for maybe a way to treat cancer. The problem was back then, the reason why it wasn't a vaccine beforehand is mRNA in itself. If I just took pure mRNA and injected it into your body, would just reject it.
Well, so what exactly is that?
mRNA?
Yeah, what does that stand for? I looked it up. I'm just not.
So that's messenger ribonucleic acid.
Okay, and what does that do?
So RNA is essentially half of a DNA.
Okay.
And the way your body uses it, it's kind of like work instructions. And this is a very oversimplification.
Yeah, give it to me. Yeah.
Your cells use that as sort of work instructions to express certain proteins.
Right.
And within your body, it can be, you eat greasy food, so your body has to store that fat in some way. So the cells, get the orders to start creating things that help store the fat.
Got it.
That would be the natural way of doing it. What we figured out is, well, we can create our own sequences and have cells do other things.
So give them other instructions.
Right. And with enough knowledge, you could start, figuring out ways to create things artificially. For instance, in this case, create antigens that the body is going to recognize as a foreign invader and develop antibodies for. And that's what the vaccine does.
And okay, now, so compared to natural immunity, or now infection-acquired immunity, why did they change it?
Oh, who knows why they changed some of these phrases.
Fear.
I mean,
fear.
Well,
they want to fear people into taking the vaccine versus getting the infected. We like natural immunity. I'm going to say natural immunity. I'm not going to say infected acquired immunity. Doesn't that sound gross? You got an infection? Yeah, I acquired the infection, and it made me...
No, I would say it is the medical... No, I think it's the medical community trying to be specific. And doctors kind of talk that way.
No way. They're the medical community trying to push back on the people that don't want the fucking vaccine.
Well, there may be an element of that. I won't say that because
just like they changed herd immunity. Herd immunity can be acquired through vaccine or natural immunity through the herd. It's just herd immunity. It doesn't have anything to do with vaccine herd immunity or natural herd immunity. It's still...
Yeah. I will say this about the difference between whether it is natural, and I'll use natural immunity or vaccine immunity.
Thank you.
I don't want to offend your sensitivity.
I'm a liberal. I'm so sensitive.
The thing with the natural is, I mean, obviously you got to acquire the virus.
Right, infection.
Well, it's the virus or the infection. I mean,
virus acquired immunity.
You can be asymptomatic.
Right. But I wasn't infected. Like, this isn't the zombie outbreak. I acquired it naturally, like through the... Come on. That's propaganda.
All right. I'm only going to take it so far to appease you here, Joseph. But
you don't have to. Say what you want.
You acquire, you can acquire the virus naturally. Someone spreads it to you. I kind of look at this, if you think of a military situation, or your body as a military situation, or your immune system as a military situation.
Yep, I've heard.
If you had, that's the equivalent of taking a bunch of raw recruits, not training them well, giving them a bunch of guns and sending them into battle and hope, and maybe they win. Not true.
They gave my son this basically, like, his white blood cells are affected, right, by the chemo, right? So they basically just they inject him with like a heightened, I'm trying, it's called G basically the way, huh?
An adjunct?
No, a booster, like a white blood cell booster, but they're right. So basically, this is how she explained it to me. She's like, you can't create white blood cells. White blood cells have to create themselves on their own, right? So you've got to come from red blood cells, and you just time takes that. It takes like 3 months to create a new blood cell, right? So what she did, they gave him this stuff that would boost his count by way of getting a whole bunch of artificial soldiers in there and just kind of moving a bunch of shit, but then they die. And his white blood count goes right back down. But it's a little bit of a boost to help them, like some not trained soldiers. They just went in there and fucking just, hey! And then...
As opposed to, let's say you take those soldiers and you put them through boot camp, you train them, you go that, and then you have,
This is the mRNA?
Yeah, this is the mRNA, or any vaccine. It doesn't have to be mRNA.
Right, but the way you're explaining it, like the soldiers are the mRNA, right? Trained. But if you didn't train them...
No, what the soldiers are your immune system. The difference is, are you training them to fight an enemy that they may not have seen before, or are you just sending them, blind into a battle situation?
Is the coronavirus, or are coronaviruses similar?
So this one seems to be, and this is where it gets outside what my knowledge base is on this. This is more, virology stuff. But my understanding, it's my amateur understanding that this particular virus is somewhat different. It is a coronavirus. It has the same general shape, the same kind of features on it, as opposed to being a flu virus, which is a different type of thing.
Right.
Influenza is something different.
Right.
But it is somewhat different. From what I know about it, apparently it kind of has a stealth mode towards it about it.
Okay.
So your body may not react to it in time before it starts doing damage.
Now that's what he was saying though. Rogan was saying if you're able to detect it, like even the things that the companies have out, if you're able to detect even the slightest of a symptom, you can actually take stuff to fight it off. And that's their argument, that like you should be telling people about these things because yes, maybe they work for only some people, but those some people are a matter, and you should be able to say, hey, if you got the slightest symptoms, take this, not completely mislead the public.
Well, no. The problem there is this is where you get clinical studies and looking at that data as opposed to just
have they had clinical studies?
Who, to the best of my knowledge, has no medical training whatsoever, other than some first aid from his MMA days.
No, but the people he interviews, the scientists that he talks to, and things like that, he's I think he's well educated. But why wouldn't they be, if they're doing clinical trial? Are they doing clinical studies and trials on those things? The alternative medicines. Not enough. Not enough in our situation. So of course they're gonna push the medical shit. The more of the we know this works, we know we're gonna do this, but at the same time, they're like, for instance, the separation between medical and more wellness, right? Just as your general wellness, as far as like your vitamins and minerals and things, not medicine, not just medicine. There's an integrative medicine.
A more holistic approach as
No,
opposed to
is holistic studying, like for instance, I would study my son's cell creation, right, and what things feed the cells that I didn't want to feed, like sugar, most basic shit. But like I was studying with the wellness doctor how to build his cells, not just, oh, you just got to wait it out. Oh, that's just what happens. Let's give him some Zofran. Let's give him some this. I tried to not have him on as much medication as possible. At one point, he was on like 10 different things, and I was like, nope, we're done. And I only gave him what he needed, because I think people get stuck in like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that, where there's no study on the other side of things. So are there studies being done on alternative medicines for COVID?
So if you're talking about like the ivermectins and stuff like that, yes. Yes, there are. Now,
just not enough to put out in the public.
Well, no, it's just they're currently ongoing. I mean, one of the things is you start hearing reports, oh, ivermectin is the way to go. So someone has to put a clinical study together. It's not something you just throw together on the spur of the moment. It takes a while to recruit patients and stuff like that.
But now the Pfizer and whatnot, they're putting together a pill.
That's Merck.
So the way I'm seeing it is that's marketing. You're taking your people away from like something that actually would help them to get your drug out there, even though,
Well, I mean, pharmaceutical companies are going to push their new drugs because that's how they make money.
Right.
I mean,
Well, what we don't know is is Fauci connected to all that? Are these scientists that are talking about this in the way they're talking about it? Do we know that they're not being influenced? Which is the discussion we had before.
So one thing scientists do need to do when they do these clinical studies is they do have to announce their some of their connections, or whether there's anything that could bias their results. They do have to do that in the papers. Now, could they lie? I suppose, but you do have independent reviewers that go through these things, and if you get caught doing that,
right,
that's a deal. And whatever you may want to say about Fauci, there are enough other scientists in there that are not connected to him in any way. I mean, you can't really beat up on the entire science community. I'm a scientist, and I assure you, actually, I am connected to the pharmaceutical company because I used to be employed by them. But
But if you
it's not
got
like
one guy speaking for everybody, then he's got to be under scrutiny. That's why I think you need more people speaking for it, and maybe people wouldn't be under such scrutiny.
Well, scrutinize him, look at his connections, and if he doesn't have any, well, then that's that.
We did.
Conversation.
We did. His connections seemed a little shady. He seems to know what he's talking about, but only because he knows what he's talking about, and he's using his know what he's talking about for ulterior motives and intentions.
Okay, there's a difference of, hey, I spoke at this conference and that conference. I mean, when you're in his position, yeah, you speak at conferences. That's what scientists do. It's another thing if you're like going golfing with the CEO of Pfizer and all that kind of thing on a regular basis, and going to their vacation. That's a little different.
Okay,
but
so there's no evidence of that.
What?
There's no evidence of that, you're saying?
Well, there's no evidence of that. No.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that either.
Actually, as a government employee, he can't do that.
It's like the one thing that people say about Bernie Sanders, like, he sold his house and bought another house. I'm like, wow, you guys are reaching. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, technically politicians aren't supposed to do that too, but politicians do shady stuff.
But, I mean, can we connect Fauci with some how Rand Paul had said, was talking about his gain of function, and he just couldn't get him to say it. Like, why can't he say that, like, yes, we were doing research, and just because it wasn't in this city, it was in the... He's manipulating his words.
Look, Rand Paul's an obnoxious little troll.
But he represents a freer party.
He represents himself sometimes.
It's okay. Not as good as Ron, but...
But, what he is trying to lead to is that somehow the U.S. Funded
indirectly
military endeavors.
Yeah,
and that's not what happened. And there's a place where Fauci gets careful about is this weaponization. It's like what I talked about at the very beginning of it.
Right.
Weaponization, looking at how viruses are going to interact or how they're going to mutate.
I don't think he was in on any that, and I think that's what we may be afraid of saying. If he says that, then they can make the connection that he might have known.
I personally think so. I mean, Rand Paul is not a stupid person. I mean, I'm not going to be mean and say something like that, but I do think he is a politician. He does want to play to his constituents, and he has. A number of people that are into the whole conspiracy theories and stuff like that, and he's being part of it. I mean, but it's a political thing for him.
You think? I don't know.
I absolutely believe that.
I think he's just he's trying to get him to be as transparent as possible. To me, that's what that particular party believes in, a lot of transparency, not over like the Republicans and Democrats. Like there's got to be transparency. Fauci, were you connected to this? Were you helping them gain a function? Yes. And, I had no ill intentions, and that's fine. It'll come out in the wash. But if you're indirect, like the United States indirectly funding the Taliban, you know what I mean? Like, that's the type of shit that you would want transparency on. Look, yes, that happened, but we had no intentions of it turning into that. We fucked up. Fauci could, is he humble enough to do that? I haven't heard him say stuff like that.
On the other side of that, though, you would think our politicians and our supposed leaders would be, okay, you fucked up. We shouldn't do this anymore. What can we do to fix it?
No,
they don't. They turn it into a political issue.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with Washington as a whole. It's not a Rand Paul thing. It's not a Fauci thing. It's not, an any one person type thing. This is how the whole system is screwed up.
Yeah. So that's where we come back full circle, and I'm like, federal oversight is unnecessary in many things. Definitely in very specific areas, I think. Like, I don't think we should have state military.
Well,
you got police. That's almost military enough.
The problem is we have too many politicians and not enough leaders.
Yeah.
And that's at all levels. That's not a Republican thing. That's not a Democrat
thing. That's in business. That's in politics. That's in everything.
people have talked about term limits and stuff like that. My problem with something like term limits is that kind of take the responsibility out of the American people. But I do think the American people would do themselves a really good thing if maybe every so often they just voted whoever was in office just out of office. Whoever the incumbent is, like them.
Yeah.
No
matter what. No, that's
like,
not gonna. It's got to be more of a fair thing. But like, I think term limits would get more people involved. A lot of younger politicians, but I think a lot of younger people would decide to get involved in politics because we wouldn't just leave it up to me. I'm driving around the other day. I'm looking at these signs for the people to vote for here in North Carolina, and all I'm thinking is like, all the old people are voting. As you're wearing your I voted sticker, I understand, but all these old people are voting, deciding our fate. I consider myself young. I'm not like. I think mostly our stuff is decided by a lot of old people, which is the case for term limits. And like all these people are like in their 80s. Even the president. Like I don't even think Bernie. I love Bernie, and I liked a lot of what he stood for, so that's why I liked him. But even he's like old, man. Why are we doing this? Like, why don't we have like younger presidents, like people that are on the ground, like more ground level, like they know what's going on. Trump got close to the ground. He's still he's not one of them, but he got so close to the ground. That's what made him popular.
Well, I mean, that's certainly the perception that he gave. But, I'm looking at time here, and I'm going to have to sign off in a little bit.
All good. Do
you have any last questions for me? I mean, we can do this again. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'll like it. Do this. Because I know there were some things that we touched on and then we kind of backed off of and went on a tangent or something like that.
Yeah.
So I certainly have a lot more to say. But if there's any last things you wanted to ask me, no.
Yeah, we didn't have much structure. We were just rambling and going back. That was cool though. I enjoyed it, and I don't take a side. I just kind of this is what they're saying. Like what about this? What about that? And you did answer the questions very well. Like so I did.
I mean, I've tried through all this to at least provide at least some information about it, and sometimes I get a lot of resistance. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I can read the literature and get an idea of what's going on.
Right.
And working as a scientist, I kind of know what the things that Fauci might have to contend with, or any public health official. There is the science of it, and there is sort of the public relations aspect of it. Because if you say the wrong thing, people start raiding the stores and taking up off the shelf.
That's why there should be more representation from a few different people, even if they disagree. Like somebody could be like, "Hey, Fauci, I don't think so," and then Fauci be like, "What do you mean you don't think so?" And then I want some like.
I guarantee you, somewhere in the CDC that does actually happen. Yeah. I'm sure he has his meetings and he has either his peers or even some of his reports, because I would say if he is running his department properly, he should be open to the ideas of the people who report to him. For saying, no, I think that's a bad idea. But at the end of the day, you kind of need someone who's going to be the consistent messenger of it. Otherwise, you get a lot more mixed messaging, because the way I may say something, the way you may say something, even if it's the same general premise, might be listened to differently by an audience.
Yeah. Well,
you might say tomato, I might say tomato, and we'll call the whole thing off.
We're both seeing a red fruit.
Well, that could be an apple. See, you've already confused.
That's right. I did that on purpose. Do you think that there's any hope for us? Do you think like we're for as far as, are we really that divided, or is that all a bunch of propaganda?
No, I think there is a division. I think this is sort of growing pains in the United States. Well, this is a completely separate conversation, so if you want to take this on, we might want to save it for another time. But
sure.
The biggest issue that I see, just personally, is you got a couple things. One, there's a big division between the cities and the rural areas. You get people who live in New York City who I don't think has ever seen a stalk of corn in their life. They haven't.
Well, they've visited, but they have no idea what it's like. The context is a little different.
Some of them, I don't think have ever even left the island.
Yeah, it's possible.
On the other hand, you have people that live in the rural areas that never have had to live in the city. And maybe they visited, maybe they haven't. But, it's one of those things where they think the world ends at the county line because whoever has left the county has never come back.
Yeah.
And it's a very distinct and different mentality. And it falls in things like this, where you wear a mask or whether you're not wearing a mask. Do you like the government? Do you hate the government? When you have a bunch of people packed together like you do in New York City, you need rules, or otherwise everyone kills each other. But if you're in rural, North Dakota, you can sit in your 50-acre farmland and take your AR-15 and shoot it in any direction.
But you don't have to wear a mask.
And you don't have to wear a mask.
Right, but that wasn't made clear in the beginning. How everyone should make their decisions based on where they live, what they're doing. Like, we made rules like a blanket because we didn't understand it. And the rules didn't change because then we were feared into doing it all instead of understanding that, like, yeah, maybe Florida went all the way out, but they had a kind of a point that, like, hey, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, but then you get everybody making different decisions. And look, from a public health issue, you kind of have to do blanket statements like that every so often.
Yeah, but you just said we had to change. You can't run this state like that state.
I think that is a problem. What I said is there's a difference in mentality, though, between people who live in the rural areas and people who live in the cities.
Right. And population.
And people who live in the rural areas are sort of like your mentality. Why would the government tell me to do this? I live in North Dakota. I have no one else around me. Why do I have to wear a mask? And at the same time, you have the people in the cities who are just like, you're being irresponsible for not wearing a mask.
But the people, it's the people in New York City telling the people in the rural North Dakota that they got to do the same thing that they're doing in their state.
Well,
and that's not true because there's context.
And that's part of, I would say, the problem in the United States as a general statement, forget the pandemic, is that, you'll have people in the cities that say, oh, we shouldn't have the electoral college anymore. We should just go to the popular vote. Well, yeah.
We shouldn't do either one.
If you did the popular vote, no one would care about North Dakota. There aren't enough people.
Right.
All you'd really care about is New York, California, and maybe Florida and maybe Chicago, and then or in Texas, and you got everyone.
Right.
You've gotten the more than half the population of the United States, and no one would ever listen to North Dakota. We wouldn't care what they thought.
Well, yeah. So that it is true. I think a little bit. Like, you need to let states decide what to do. Sometimes it doesn't need to be so much oversight.
The electoral college at least kind of balances that out a little bit.
They redraw lines.
There are other problems. There are other problems with the electoral college. But that would be one issue. I think the other issue is that there's a real disparity in income. And you have the very rich, and you have the very poor. And I really got to go here. That was my son calling.
Yeah, no problem. And they don't understand where each other is coming from. So let's get into a different conversation another time, man.
Yep, I will talk to you later.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, man.
Right.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, peace. Hey, thanks for watching, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Stop for a second.
Hey, what are we doing?
Turn around.
What are we doing?
Homework assignment.
What kind of homework assignment? Hey, is that a gun? Please.
On a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to 0.
Would you rather be dead? No. Would you rather die here? No. What did you want to be, Raymond K. Hessel?
The question, Raymond, was what did you want to be?
Answering, Raymond. Jesus.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up.